This is Brother Philip Ware, one of the teachers here at the Lily Grove Missionary Baptist Church, and I've been asked to do the review on the lesson dated March the 13th, Freedom to Worship. On the screen you will see two individuals. One of them is Chris, and the other one is Cameron Burrell. Two of these, Cameron Burrell was a track star at the University of Houston. His father was one of the fastest men on the earth, Leroy Burrell. And Chelsea Kiss was she was Miss America, crowned Miss USA, matter of fact. Both of these individuals had a tragic incident that happened in their lives. Both of them was found who committed suicide. And as I looked up their biography and I looked up the news article on both of them, I found something that was very astounding. Both of them had a result from their parents. Their parents gave a statement. And Leroy Burrell says this, that we may never know why Cameron made such a decision to commit suicide. Chelsea's parents says she was dealing with a high functional depression, which she hid from everyone else. Two things that I found in their statements is that whatever they was going through, they hid it and kept it to themselves. They didn't share it with anybody, and that's the demise in both of them. Question: why do we become prisoners of our situations rather than seeking liberation from our situations? That's the question that we pose as we get into this lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at King Darius, who shares with us how he liberated returning exiles from their oppression as they faced during the rebuilding of God's temple. As I mentioned, our text is coming from Ezra chapter 6, verses 1 through 12. The background for this lesson is that the Israelites had been given a green light to go back to Jerusalem and start the rebuilding of the temple. During that rebuilding process, they came up against opposition. And as a result of the opposition, the governor at that time asked them what were they doing, who gave them permission to start the rebuilding process of this temple. They said that King Cyrus gave them permission. And the governor at that time wrote a message to King Darius to validate, did they really have permission to rebuild the temple? Our lesson picks up right there when King Darius get the message that they have gotten permission to rebuild at in Jerusalem. What did he say? Well, in verse 1, we find this statement. King Darius issued an order that a search be made in the Babylonian archives, which was stored in the treasury. The first thing that King Darius did as a result of trying to validate the permission that the Jews had to go and rebuild the temple, the first thing that he did was he sought an answer. He didn't take their words, nor did he issue a decree to do what he wanted to do. He sought an answer to find out if, in fact, that they did have permission. I think that's one of the very first things that we want to find that we see in this lesson. King Darius had a problem, and first thing that he did was to seek an answer to it. And I think that's something that we can learn from that. Whenever we have an issue that's going on or a problem that we're facing, the first thing we should do is seek an answer to it. Don't hide it. Don't look over it, but seek an answer. That's what King Darius did. He sought to find the answer. Did, in fact, the Jews have permission from the king, the predecessor king, King Cyrus, to build that temple? He sought. And not only did he sought, it wasn't at the first place that he sought. It wasn't there, but he was diligent in his seeking, in his search. It wasn't at the place that it was initially found to go. He didn't find it there, but he continued his search until he did find it. So he looked for an answer. And verse 2, we find that he found an answer. Verse 2 says this, but it was at the fortress of Ecbatana in the province of Media that the scroll was found. He first sought an answer, and then he found an answer. Verse 2 said he found it. He searched and he searched and he searched until he found the answer. He found the decree that he was looking for. And verse 3 says this, after he found the decree, He found it and read it, and this is what it says: "Let the temple be rebuilt on the site where the Jews used to offer their sacrifice, using the original foundation. Its height will be 90 feet, and its width will be 90 feet." Not only did he sought an answer, not only did he find an answer, but he accepted the answer. He found what he was looking for, and he verified that the Jews did have permission to rebuild that temple right where they was building that. One of the key points that I find from this lesson is this: if you want an answer to your problem, you got to search for it. Your problem, I believe that every problem has an answer, but it's not just going to drop out the sky into your lap. You got to do your due diligence in finding an answer. That's the first key point. The second key point is this: the answer to life's problem is always found in God's will. I believe in this time of the year, starting in March, April, and May, a lot of college kids are going to be graduating. A lot of high school kids are going to be graduating. You ask them what are they going to do for life, for the rest of their life. They're going to tell you, well, this is what I want to do. Very seldom do you see people telling you what God wants them to do. They tell you what they want to do, but very few people find out what God wants them to do. I believe that everybody who's on the planet has been put here with a purpose. And the only way that you're going to find out what your purpose is, you got to find God. And he will tell you why he created you. You're in his will. He has a will for our lives. And if your life is not going the way that it should be going, the best place to ask, the best person to ask is your creator, the one who put you here. He has the answer, and he has a will already laid out, a plan already laid out for your life. Question: why do people not look for the answers to their problem? People have problems. Every day people go through issues in life, but a lot of people internalize those problems instead of looking for an answer. Why do people do that? Are they afraid? Are they ashamed? What is it that keeps people from not seeking the answer to their problem? I think that's a good question for discussion during your class period. But in this first section, we found out that the decree that King Cyrus had written was already resurrected by King Darius. And he didn't stop until he found out where that decree was. He found it, he sought it, and then he accepted the answer to it. That's the first section. The second part of this lesson is entitled Restored Protection. That's verses 5 and 7. Point is that the will of God provides protection. Okay? There was resistance to rebuilding the temple at Jerusalem from many sides. People who were left in the city during the exile, and Samaritans who lived nearby, and enemies of Judah who did not want them to restore the land. As a result of that, the Jews had many problems. They had many issues. They had many things that kept them from performing the work. But in this quest that King Darius looked for the decree to validate that they have permission to build a temple, he also issued a decree of his own. And we find that in verse number 7. Verse 7 reads as thus: "Do not disturb the construction of the temple of God. Let it be rebuilt on its original site, and do not hinder the governor of Judah and the elders of the Jews in their work." Not only did King Darius find the answer that he was looking for, he issued a decree of his own. And his decree was, don't bother these Jews while they're doing their work. Leave them alone and let them continue the work that they have been required to do. But one of the key points that I find in this section is this: that the safest place in the world is always in the will of God. As long as you're in the will of God, God is going to provide the protection that you need. And that's what the Jews found here. They were doing the will of God. King Darius found out that the will of God was for them to rebuild that temple. And doing what they were supposed to do, doing what they was called to do, they found protection all in it. If you really want to find out what God's will is for your life, once you find it, you will also not only find his will, but you'll find his protection. His protection goes with his will. And that's what we find in this lesson. The question that I have as a result of this lesson is that how has God protected you or a loved one in the past? I'm a firm believer that if you're in the will of God, no matter what the world throws at you, God is going to be able to protect you. I believe there's somebody who's looking at this shot today, who's been tested, who's been questioned, who has been challenged. And one of the things that you find out is that God has delivered you. One of the scriptures in the Bible, I think, is Psalms 34:19. Many are the afflictions of the righteousness, but God delivered them out of them all. The last section of this lesson is titled Renewed Resources. That's verses 8 to 12. How can you make your enemies? How can God make your enemies into servants and helpers? Well, that's what we find out in this verse number 8 here. It says, moreover, I hereby decree that you are to help these elders of the Jews as they rebuild this temple of God. You must pay for the full construction cost without delay from my taxes collected in the province west of the Euphrates River, so that the work will not be interrupted. What we find out here is that the people that was giving the Jews a hard time asked, did they have permission? And once the permission was found out that they did have permission to do it, King Darius made a decree that the very same people that put up a fight, that restricted them from doing the work, he ordered a decree for them to help them finish the work. All we find here is that God has provided not only protection for his will, not only did he find an answer for his will, but here we see that he found resources to finish his will. God said, in this section, we find that King Darius made a decree that he was going to pay for them out of the taxes that was collected during that region. And not only was he going to find the cost, he commanded that the people give them a hand. He made the enemies, the Jews' enemies into servants. One of the key points that I see in this section is that if it's God's will, he's always going to foot the bill. Whatever God's will is for your life, with any cost that you incur, God's going to find a way to foot that bill. Here's a question. What resources are needed to fulfill the plan that God has for you in your life? Is it tuition? Is it finance? Is it favor? What is it that you're going to need to fulfill the will that God has for your life? Well, whatever it is, believe me that God is going to foot the bill. So here's another question. Why do we become prisoners of our situation rather than seeking liberation from our situation? First of all, we don't seek God's plan. This is a review of what we just covered. We don't first seek God's plan. And as a result of not seeking God's plan, we don't find his protection, and we also don't find his provision. Lily Grove, one of the things I wanted to share through this lesson and through this illustration was that many people are committing suicide. And one of the reasons they're committing suicide is that they don't seek an answer. And a lot of people who might be going through something right now, as we're looking at this clip, might be going through something. One of the things that Leroy Burrell mentioned was that we encourage anyone who might be struggling in their lives to reach out for help. One of the biggest problems with people who commit suicide is that they never get a chance to reach out for help. It's my appeal, and I want to encourage you, just like Leroy Burrell, is that if you're going through some problem, whatever it might be, seek help. And once you I pray that when you seek help, that you'll find God's will. And in God's will, you're going to find two things. You're going to find protection. You're going to find provision. May God bless you.